The story I would like to tell you today is about a lake. It's about a beautiful lake in the Sahel in northern Mali. This lake was so important because it was in a harsh environment, producing water for agriculture, producing fish, water for livestock. So because this lake was so important, some NGOs came up with the idea to protect this lake with a tree from the sand surrounding the lake. They chose the prosopis, which is a very, very resistant species for drought, but at the same time, this is an invasive species. That you keep that in mind. What happens next is that what people didn't count was that the lake might disappear because of climate change. And that is actually what happened. So the lake disappeared. And because the lake disappears, people lost their livelihoods. No fish, no livestock, no agriculture. And the next thing which happened is that the prosopis, actually, the tree, took the lake over. And we had suddenly a forest where was a lake before. And can you imagine now people living there, having their livelihood from fish, now has to deal with trees and with ecosystem services coming from the forest. And this is where we, scientists from CIFOR, Maria and me basically, we were there trying to understand how are people actually adapting to this dramatic change in the environment. And we talked with men, with women, with older people, with young people, with pastoralists, with farmers, because we wanted to get a kind of different opinions. The first thing we find is that migration was one of the most important strategies for men. But it was not for women. These men were migrating to go to the mining area in the south. And this migration of men had a huge impact on the social system because suddenly we had villages where we had women, kids, children, and elderly. So let's imagine we have a shift in the ecosystem which created a shift in the social system. This is something we need to keep always in mind, that those shifts goes together. The second thing we observed is that the workload of women, of course, increased because they had to take over all the activities which were done by men before. So we saw that they are not adapting only to the change in the environment, they are also adapting to the migration of men. So they are adapting to different things, and that is the second important thing. We also saw that women, even women, were not the same. We had women who were traditionally the lower class. And those women, we thought they would be the most vulnerable women in the region. We discovered this is completely wrong. Those women actually were the ones who took advantages from the trees because socially they are allowed to do charcoal, while the richer women, the one who we thought they are the less vulnerable, were in this situation the most vulnerable. They became vulnerable because of the change which happens in the ecosystem. So vulnerability shifted completely, and also our thinking about vulnerability shifted. So we had suddenly charcoal production from prosopis, and prosopis is one of the best charcoal in this region. And the women, the poorest women, took advantages from that, and then they could make a huge effort to adapt and produce charcoal, sell it, and assure the food security of their children. So we find out that those women were having less problems to deal with food security, for instance, while the women who could not move because they were not allowed to move, and the women who were not allowed to do charcoal were actually the ones who are suffering in this situation, with the workload increasing because men are not there. So these assumptions are wrong. The next thing we find is, okay, women are adapting, this is nice, but they don't have the knowledge to adapt because they were actually pastoralists or farmers. They never did charcoal. And there were no support from any organization thinking about these women need the knowledge to produce charcoal. The second thing we find, that was about mobility. Women couldn't sell their charcoal in the market in the city, so they were selling their charcoal to men who sell it in the market. So this is a second factor which hindered them to take advantage from this adaptive strategy. They were active, but there was no support. The third thing, which is in the same direction, is that by shifting the ecosystem, the land tenure also shifted completely, because forest is under the government, while the lake area, the agriculture area, was under the customary right. So suddenly those women who were adapting became illegal, or they do charcoal illegally. So this is the third factor. What I mean here is that vulnerability or adaptation is something very, very ambiguous. They look all the same, but they are not the same. So we have to unveil vulnerabilities. We had to look at them at the local context. We had to look at them in terms of power relations, in terms of shifts, and we need to be always aware about that. Now, what is the vision for the future? There we find also that is amazing, because at the national level they had already spent billions to bring the lake back. So they were putting channels like here and saying to people, we will bring you the lake back. And every politician who was in the region saying exactly that. So not only that people are adapting, they got the expectations that in their adaptation they will get the lake back. And this hindered also people to use their own strategies. They were not empowered to use their strategies. They were waiting for the lake to come back. While waiting, they produced a little bit of charcoal. And I think this is now, with the three factors I was talking about, what hindered women actually to adapt. I think this is very, very important that we as scientists, when we arrive in this kind of regions, that we are the bridge. We have to bridge this different knowledge. We have to bridge the different scales. We have to bridge the different communities. And this is what we should do, and this is how I understand our work. Thank you very much.